I get it, there's a ton of hype around cinema-grade mirrorless cameras, but the moment you pop the box open, the excitement can turn into disappointment. You've probably seen a sleek body on the website, a glossy sample video, and maybe a few rave comments, only to discover that the autofocus stalls on a moving subject, the low-light grain looks worse than you expected, or the menu feels like you need a master's degree to change a simple setting. That hesitation is real, and that's why I'm breaking down the Sony Cinema Line FX30 Super 35 camera so you can decide if it truly fits your workflow before you spend the cash. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the FX30 lands in Sony's Cinema Line, which is basically the company's answer to the indie filmmaker market that wants a Super 35 sensor without the price tag of the flagship FX9. The key selling points Sony advertises are high sensitivity with low noise, the new S-Cinetone color science, a dual-base ISO system, and highly accurate autofocus with subject tracking. Those sound great on paper, but let's unpack how they behave when you're shooting a short documentary, a music video, or a YouTube vlog. Low-light performance is where the FX30 starts to show its teeth. The dual-base ISO 800 and ISO 12, 800 means the sensor can switch to a higher native gain without the typical 12-stop noise climb you see on many APS-C cameras. In practice, that translates to clean, usable footage even when you're shooting a candlelit interview or a nighttime street scene with just a fast prime lens. I tested it by walking into a dimly lit coffee shop with just the kit's standard 1635mm and cranking the ISO to 12800. The image stayed surprisingly noise-free, and the dynamic range held up enough to pull back some shadows in post without turning everything into a grey mush. For creators who rely on natural light or have to work quickly without extensive lighting gear, that flexibility can shave hours off your prep time. Autofocus confidence is another hot topic for video shooters, especially when you're chasing moving subjects like a dancer or a child running around a park. Sony's real-time IAF and real-time tracking have become industry staples, and the FX30 inherits them with a few tweaks for cinema use. The camera can lock onto a face, stay glued while the subject moves laterally, and even keep focus on a dog's eye if you're filming a pet vlog. The catch: the autofocus works best when you have decent contrast and enough light. In the deep dark scenes I mentioned earlier, the AF can hunt a bit before settling. That's not a deal breaker, but it means you should still be comfortable pulling focus manually or using focus peaking when you go full low light. Stabilization is where the FX30 shows a bit of restraint. Unlike the A7 or the FX3, the FX30 does not have built-in 5-axis IBIS. Sony expects you to pair it with lenses that have optical steadyshot, OSS, or rely on external gimbals. If you're a handheld shooter who loves the freedom of a run-and-gun setup, you'll need to factor in that extra gear cost. On the flip side, the lack of IBIS does help keep the body a little lighter and the battery compartment more accessible, which can be a plus for long-day shoots where swapping batteries is inevitable. Speaking of batteries, the FX30 uses Sony's NP-FZ100, the same large-capacity cell that powers the A7 SII and FX3. In my testing, a fully charged battery gave me roughly 85 minutes of continuous 4K 60p recording, pretty solid for a cinema-style camera. You can also run a dummy battery with external power if you're doing a static interview setup, so battery anxiety is manageable as long as you plan your shoots and carry a spare or two. Menu navigation is a love-or-hate point for Sony cameras. The FX30 inherits the same layered menu system that can feel labyrinthine at first. However, Sony has added a dedicated video button that brings up a quick access overlay for common settings like ISO, white balance, picture profile, and focus mode. Once you get past the initial learning curve, you can switch between S-Cinetone and other picture profiles in a few taps, which is a real time saver when you're moving between a cinematic scene and a bright outdoor segment. If you're a complete beginner who prefers a single auto button, this might feel overwhelming, but if you already own any Sony mount camera, the menu language will feel familiar. Now let's talk lenses. The FX30 uses Sony's mount, which is arguably the most versatile ecosystem in the mirrorless world. You have access to a massive range of native Sony G-Master lenses, affordable third-party options from Sigma and Tamron, and even adapted full-frame lenses via adapters that retain autofocus and aperture control. For a creator who already has a bag of mount lenses, the FX30 is a natural upgrade. If you're starting from scratch and only have, say, a Canon DSLR kit, you'll need an adapter and might encounter slower AF with some older lenses. That's not a showstopper, but it does